So it's day 2, my second commute home on the Mike and Bike show. Hello. It's beginning to be a little bit more of a routine, biking with the show. I'm going to pause here. Well, I'll pause at the bottom of the trail here. My cable, the cord to my cell phone is getting caught on my knees. Forgot to wrap it up a little bit to shorten it on me. So I'm listening to yet another episode of the older episode of This American Life on my way home, and just wrapping up a segment with the late David Rakoff, covering some teachers from Austria who came to New York to teach in the public school system and their experience. And surprise, surprise, none of them knew knew about the sound of music. And no, Edelweiss is not the national anthem of Austria. Who knew? Just, of course, segments like that come off making it seem like Americans are all idiots and that everything abroad is better. Some things are, but some things aren't. Yeah, there's some pretty dumb Americans, but I've been in Europe and there's some pretty dumb Europeans too, so I think you can find it all around. Oh, it's such a pleasant ride home. Not as chilly as this morning. Neither is it super sunny. I love this. I'm not a huge fan of the sun and lots of heat. For some reason they're playing music from The Godfather on This American Life and their interlude. Good movie. Haven't seen it in quite a few years, I must say. Here we go. I had my first feedback from a listener of my show today. My dad, who lives in Florida, saw my first episode. He thought it was okay. And I talked with him for a little bit before I left work. He was telling me, repeating his interest in having us send our kids out to visit them again. I like the idea, but they're still a bit young. Certainly something my wife and I need to discuss. Come up with a way where we could send our kids to visit their grandparents. They don't get to see all that often. But it's a long way away in Florida, all by themselves, traveling. We'll see how we can make it work. There we go. I've been lucky not to hit too many insects this year so far. This stretch of road in the woods here sometimes is so full of insects that I'm running into them all the time and getting them in my eyes. I Guess I should consider getting goggles sometime. That's another reason the winter is nice. Of course, we don't have a lot of sun in the winter around here either, quite often, which is another nice thing. I see a truck here where they were doing their habitat reconstruction. I wonder if somebody's still there. They're interviewing a gentleman who's from Sicily. He's been living in America for many, many years, even from being a kid, but he's never become a citizen. Has an American accent and everything, and they're asking him why he doesn't still feel he's an American, why he hasn't gotten his citizenship. Yeah, your identity is an interesting thing. I've been living in America since since 1990, so that's 24 years. And to this day, I likely feel more Canadian than American, believe it or not. Hello! My Canadian friends tell me I sound like an American. But in my heart, I still feel like a Canadian. I don't know, there's something about where you grow up, I guess, that forms a core of your identity, your formative years or something. At least for me, anyway. Oddly, though, when I'm in Canada, I always feel a little bit like a fish out of water and often end up defending America from my Canadian friends and relatives who are trying to explain what they think is wrong with America. And when I'm in the US, I'm always defending Canada. Americans who think that the Canadian healthcare system is terrible and so on. It's just so funny how I end up defending the other country wherever I am. I see great things in both countries, in both the US and Canada. And they also have their flaws too. Whoops, sorry. So yes, I have my US citizenship, but I still feel like I'm a Canadian. Oh, there's somebody canoeing or kayaking down the river there. Very interesting. I've ridden this bike trail along the river all the way to Seattle. It goes quite a ways. It's like 40 some miles. Ridden all the way there to, I think I stopped at Gasworks Park in Seattle, and then biked right through downtown, took the I-90 bridge back. Hello. That's an interesting contraption that guy's conveying himself with. The only thing I don't like about that tricycle thing is that he weaves all the way across the road. I mean, I pass him frequently, actually. There are times where it's hard to pass him. He's taking up the whole pathway. It's a little bit windy. I suppose that's going to show up in the audio feed. The sound of the wind. I'm actually surprised there's not more people on the trails this week. The weather has been pretty nice. Normally, it seems to be more packed on such pleasant days. At least that's been my experience. You know, back to this whole identity thing, American, Canadian, German, French, whatever. I think there's something to be said for being an outsider. The people who grow up in the country kind of take it for granted. The people who come there from somewhere else, they grow up thinking, or they come in and see all the potential and the opportunities. It's kind of the forest for the trees phenomenon. If you're raised in a country, you can't see it for what it is, see the opportunities, or it's harder. When you go to the most stifling European country, Switzerland, say, and it's amazing how immigrants will often thrive because they come there, and to them, they're not beholden by the societal structures that everyone else has grown up with, that lock you in your place and teach you what you should be doing. And because they don't know the rules and don't know that they are supposed to fit in a certain place, they go and do amazing things anyway. I remember when I was in Germany, I lived there for about a year in 1989 and 1990, and as an outsider, I had no idea what I couldn't do or shouldn't do. I remember I was just a teenager, found jobs doing computer programming under the table, illegally by the way, since I didn't have any Arbeitserlaubnis, but I also came across a lot of interesting things that surprised my German friends. Remember I went to dinner at one friend who I met, a good friend of mine who I met there, and her father was a professor of ancient Greek at a university in Munich. And I was telling them about they were asking me about my workplace. And I was telling them how I was quite surprised I was telling him how everybody referred to everyone by their first name. And in my language class, they had said you don't do that. And Germans don't talk to each other by their first name unless they're family or something. And this professor was stunned. He didn't think Germans behaved this way. So in his little world, things were much more traditional. And so here I am, the outsider, and I just take it, well, if my boss tells me to call him Angelo, then that's the way it should be. So I remember a lot of Germans saying, how did you get that job? Dude, as a programmer, you're only 17. You don't have the credentials or degrees. And I had some friends who made it quite clear to me, they said, no German would have ever been hired by those same companies unless they had the credentials. But as an outsider, people kind of gave me a little more credit, I guess. Or they figure that all those Canadian teenagers are geniuses with computers or something. So here's to being an outsider. It's a good thing. Speaking of outsiders, my family watched the movie The Outsiders just a few weeks ago. I think it was an early 90s production. Let's see, it was the same director of The Godfather, if I'm not mistaken. Coppola, that's it. Francis Ford Coppola. Brings back memories. I remember having to read that book, The Outsiders, when I was in high school. Well, actually, junior high. And when I was in junior high in Red Deer, Alberta, had almost no relation to anything I knew in my world with games and all this. I don't know why that was on our required reading list at the time. It's interesting. I watch a lot of older movies that aren't current. One of these days I'll have to watch the Lord of the Flies movie. Heard so much about the story, I guess I should read the book. What happens to people when they're living by themselves without the veneer of civilization? I also love documentaries. I watched a fascinating documentary just a couple weeks ago called Searching for Sugar Man. Just amazing. I think it won an Academy Award a couple years ago, or a year ago, in 2013. And it was about this musician from Detroit who made some albums in the early 70s. Sixto Rodriguez was his name, and he was a total flop. No sales, and he just became totally forgotten. And then apparently he became a huge hit in South Africa during the years of apartheid. His folk music became an anthem, or anthems to a lot of the young people growing up in South Africa, the white middle class anyway. But he had no idea hello. And Sixto just went on working in construction all these years since the 70s, living pretty much in poverty until he was discovered in the late 90s by some of his fans in South Africa. And he went on tours, packed stadiums. Just amazing to have your life change like that. And everyone in South Africa thought he was dead. And there were all these rumors that he'd committed suicide. And then they discovered that he was actually still alive. And there's a bit of a mystery about what might have happened to the royalties from South Africa in those years, because he never saw any of the money. I know there's some lawsuits going on right now about it. But who knows what really happened. I've read that international sales back in the 70s and 80s sometimes would never pay royalties to the main labels. And so maybe there never was a lot of money paid in. Who knows? It'll take some good forensic accounting, I suppose. And then a bunch of the record labels went bankrupt. The original label that Sixto had performed for went out of business. Was bought by somebody else. Several mergers and bankruptcies later, God only knows who owns the rights and what happened to money that had been collected. Nevertheless, Monsieur Rodriguez is now a musician again. Actually, I guess he never stopped, but he didn't have much of an audience listening to him over the years. His songs aren't bad. Definitely folk song type of thing. And I downloaded some of the tracks and we're listening to them. They're okay. It isn't Joni Mitchell, but hey, you can't have everything. We're getting closer now to our destination. And no flats today. That's good. I don't know what I'm going to do when I have a flat. Am I going to stop the recording while I repair my bike, or just keep it going? Who knows? Maybe my vast audience will enjoy the therapeutic images of bicycle repair. Yeah, I'm definitely feeling the ride home here. I don't feel exhausted. I could bike for hours more, but I definitely am getting a good sweat. I sweat pretty easy. Water's coursing across my face. There's a contented cat. lying on the warm pavement or sidewalk. There used to be a Swedish family living in that house. They had kids the age of our kids. They got along really well. It was a sad day when they moved back to Sweden. They were from Malmo in southern Sweden. And here we have arrived. And this ends the evening commute. I'll see you all tomorrow at the next episode of Mike and Bike.